Hello, biologists. It's fungi time. The first thing we have to discuss when we talk about a fungus is what is a mushroom, because that's the part of fungus that we see most often. And a mushroom is actually just the fruiting body of the fungus. So it's like a apple tree producing an apple. The mushroom produces spores instead of seeds, but the apple tree lives underground and it pushes the apple up. So we only ever see the sexual reproduction structure of the fungi, not its actual body. So here I have two images. I have a mushroom here. It is growing above ground. This part of the mushroom is called the fruiting body because it's making spores to reproduce with. So this is what we think of as the mushroom. It's got a cap, it's got gills, it's got a stem. All of that is made of filaments called hyphae. One single filament is a hyphae. If there's more than one hyphae, we call it mycelium. So a mushroom is made of mycelium, but that's just for reproduction. Its body lives under it. So here in the soil, we can see this network of mycelium. That is the fungus body. So when you pick a mushroom, like I picked this Mycena epipterygia, which means upon wing, probably because it looks so beautiful, it could fly away. This Mycena here is just the fruiting body. I picked this Mycena from this decomposing log in the background here. All of this fungus's body is still in that log. I did not kill the fungus by picking it. I just picked the apple off of the apple tree, so to speak. So that fungus is still in this log, decomposing this wood, and I just pulled off its fruiting body. It's got these beautiful yellow stems. This is one of my favorite Mycenas. This is in Corbett, so I collected this close to campus. We also want to talk about the fungi life cycle. This lecture is going to be about ecology. Then we'll have another one in detail on the fungus life cycle, and then one about fungal evolution. So the fungal life cycle, just to get this idea that the mushroom is only part of the fungus, starts with a whole mushroom here. So this mushroom is sitting on the ground. We know that the individual fungus is in the dirt below it. But the point of growing this mushroom, like growing this large structure, is to release your spores. So these spores are equivalent to seeds, which means they contain all the genetic information needed for another generation. If that spore lands in a suitable habitat, it will germinate and it will grow into mycelium. A single piece of mycelium is called a hyphae. So this is a hyphae. And as soon as it grows more than one branch, now it's mycelium. When two fungi that are mating compatible find each other, the way that they mate is they grow their mycelium together, creating a whole new body that contains nuclei from both the original parents. So this is what we call dikaryotic nuclei. It's got nuclei for mom and dad, and this mycelium will grow for years, maybe for thousands of years. And if it wants to reproduce, then it will go through meiosis and create spores. But it can live in that vegetative form under the ground for maybe forever. We don't really understand fungi very well. And so it's in the dirt, it's in the log, it's growing, and we only ever get to see it when it decides to reproduce. When it reproduces, it takes its mycelium and it starts to grow a bud, and then that bud grows into a mushroom. And on your mushroom, your fungi will do meiosis and produce spores, and those will blow away on the wind and land somewhere and grow into another fungus, which may or may not ever produce mushrooms. So mushrooms are hard to study because we only see the apple, and the apple tree doesn't produce apples all the time. They're really picky. It has to be the right temperature. There has to be the right light cues. Some fungi only produce mushrooms on the edges of melting snowbanks. Like they get really persnickety. And so for us to see them and know that they're there, we have to wait until they reproduce. And they don't do that often or reliably. So we have to try and see what's out there every year, and it might be different than last year. Fungi are classified in a couple of different ways. We estimate that there are 1.5 to 5 million different species. Now that's a huge range. The 1.5 number is based on the number of plants that exist. This Amanita right here, Amanita smithiana, is, I think, one of the most beautiful mushrooms. Look at this little meringue on the edge. But it's associated with different trees. And so currently we think there's about 6 fungi for every type of vascular plant. And if that's true, based on the number of vascular plants we have, there should be 1.5 million fungi. Another option is we estimate there's about 10% of arthropods associated with fungi in their bodies and on their bodies. If that's true, based on the number of arthropods that exist, there should be about 3 million fungi. And then the 5 million number, that's the most recent one. That was determined by taking a biopsy of the soil, pulling out all the DNA found in that soil, looking at the ITS sequence, which is a piece of DNA that codes for the small subunit in the ribosome, and determining if that is fungal. And if it is fungal, how many different types of fungi were in that biopsy of the soil. They found a lot every time they've done it. And so that estimate, based on the amount of soil fungi that exist, we think there should be about 5 million on Earth. Either way, we have only described 120,000 species of fungi. Only 20 of those make mushrooms. And we estimate that based on those numbers, we only really know 5%, which means 95% of fungi is out there undiscovered. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it does. And I find that so exciting because there's so much more to learn. All of our fungi are going to have the same characteristics. There's 8 of them. First, they're all eukaryotic. They're almost all multicellular, except for yeast. They're unicellular. They grow those filaments that we call hyphae, and more than one called mycelium. They are heterotrophic, so they do not do photosynthesis. Instead, they eat food just like you and I do. In fact, they use similar enzymes that we use. And they consume their food via extracellular digestion, which means they secrete their digestive fluid outside of their body, and it digests everything around them, and then they reabsorb the digested products. So we do the same thing, but we digest all of our food in our intestines. So it's like if instead of doing it in your intestines, you slapped your intestines onto something and then sucked it all back up. Fungi have cell walls composed of chitin. Plants use cellulose. So chitin is special for fungi, but it's also going to be found in arthropods, in insect bodies. They perform intranuclear mitosis and meiosis, which means during prophase of cell division, the nuclear envelope does not break down. All of the metaphase and anaphase and telophase occurs within the nuclear envelope. And then the nuclear envelope divides into 2. So it's just a different way to do it. When they have extra carbohydrates, they store them as glycogen and lipids, which is the same thing we do. Plants, they store their extra carbohydrates as starch. And they use the codon UGA for tryptophan. You know that UGA in mammals is a stop codon. So it's just different use of that codon. And lastly, fungi reproduce with spores, but so do some plants. So if there's these 8 characteristics, we call it a fungi. If there's not, then it goes into a different group, often the protists, like those oomycetes that we talked about last week, which were pretty beautiful. Now, fungi ecologically can be saprotrophs or biotrophs. Troph means to eat. So a biotroph is going to get its food from something living. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. We'll talk about it. And saprotrophs are going to eat dead things. So here, this is from Dabney Park, right on the Sandy River, about 15 minutes from school. I've got a picture of Pleurotus. This is the oyster mushroom. It's a wonderful edible. And what this mushroom is doing is it's growing out the side of this log. This log was cut, you can see more over here, and it got infected with the fungus. The fungus is going through the log, so the mushroom is popping out the side, but the fungus itself lives in that log, and it is decomposing the wood. It's eating this dead material, so it's a saprotroph. Here I have a russula. Russulas are really hard to identify as species, so I always put a question mark. I'm not sure it's Cyanoxantha, but I think it is. So here's this beautiful russula. I love russula because they have wonderful colors and the stems are really brittle, so they crunch like chalk if you squeeze them too hard. Russulas are biotrophic. This fungus that lives in the ground is associated with the plants around it, and it's actually getting its food from those plants in exchange for things it's doing for the plants to benefit them. So they are sharing with the plants, and we'll talk about that in detail in a second. Saprotrophic fungi, the fungi that eat dead things, are really important for us. Imagine that if every time a leaf fell off a tree or a branch fell off a tree or a squirrel died, whatever it is, all that dead material just started stacking up and it would increase every fall. Like we would be walking around in dead bodies and dead leaves, and it would be disease-ridden and awful. Instead, fungi decomposers take care of all of it for us. Every time a leaf or a branch or a squirrel falls dead on the ground, saprotrophic fungi and bacteria are going to take those organic compounds, decompose them, use them in their bodies to create more fungal material, and release them back into the environment to be recycled. So these are nature's recyclers and decomposers, and they are keeping us all safe and free of disease by doing so, because what if they just stacked up? It would be awful. So here I've got a picture of a decomposer that you're probably familiar with. This is an orange, and it's been infected with fruit mold. This is actually a penicillium. That is where we get the medicine penicillin from. Penicillin is a really powerful antibiotic, and it's a fungus. It's a fruit-eating fungus, and so it's really common in our kitchens if you have like a fruit bowl and you forget to eat your oranges in time. These decomposers are amazing. They make so many great compounds, and they're also really important in the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the phosphorus cycle. And as we'll talk about when we talk about associations with plants, they're really important in the water cycle as well. These decomposers are so effective that they are eating things, they're doing cellular respiration because they have mitochondria, because they're eukaryotic. And as they eat things, they release carbon dioxide, just like you do, and they release 85 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year. So that is a huge volume of carbon dioxide coming just from fungi doing decomposition. We think there's about 100,000 species of molds. Many of them are not well defined, and that number is a question mark, and we're going to keep learning about it because remember, we only know 5% of fungus on Earth, so there's so much more research to do. We wanted to figure out how diverse fungi were, specifically saprotrophic fungi, fungi that are decomposing litter in the forest. And so what they did was this study took 5-gram quantities, which is not much, it's a little bit, 5 grams is tiny, from specific locations in Costa Rica, and they looked at the leaf litter only. And on average, in each 5 grams, they found 100 different species of saprotrophic fungi. That means that we can estimate that there's about 2,000 different species of saprotrophic fungi in California alone, based on a follow-up study done from some colleagues in the Bay Area. So really amazing estimates there. Here we have a picture of wood chips in a garden, and you can see the mycelium running through the wood chips in the garden. So this is the body of the fungus. Here we have another image of mycelium. This mycelium is incredible. It is holding together soil. It is decomposing those litters, releasing nutrients. It's food for hundreds of types of bugs. It is really important to creating soil in the first place, so that's soil genesis. All of that is helping us from not having constant runoff of nutrients, landslides, losing our dirt layer, our topsoil layer. So really important ecologically to the entire system. Fungi also have the ability to store extra calcium as calcium oxalate crystals. Here are images of these calcium oxalate crystals. And these calcium oxalate crystals, they can save them and then melt them and use them when they're ready to grow, which is really important because it helps prevent their hyphae from being eaten by bugs, but it also creates oxalic acid, and oxalic acid can break down rock, and that creates soil. So they're creating soil as well. We also have fungi that live inside of leaves. What's wild is we have found it in pretty much every type of plant we've looked at. Here is a pine needle. This is a little hole in the pine needle that the pine needle uses to breathe. And the black coloration is the fungus inside of it. When this pine needle was living, the fungus wasn't doing anything. As far as we can tell, it wasn't doing anything. It wasn't harming or hurting the plant. But the moment the pine needle fell off, it started decomposing it. And so it's like setting itself up to beat the competition to the falling leaf litter so that it can decompose it quickly and readily. We also have saprotrophic fungi that have been farmed by insects. An example is leafcutter ants. Leafcutter ants associated with fungi over 50 million years ago. So they invented agriculture, and their system of agriculture is incredibly complex. I have a video for you, and it is so cool, and I'm excited for you to see how this works. But the fungus is eating the leaves. The ants don't eat the leaves. And as the fungus eats the leaves that the ants collect for it, it produces little bits of its body that are nutrient rich, and the ants eat those. So the ants are feeding the fungus so that they can eat the fungus. So they're farming it, which is wonderful. Termites do this too. Here's a termite mound. About 80% of termites also house fungi, and they have a more elaborate structure. These termites tend to live in hot areas, and so they create these mounds that can be up to 10 feet tall. And what's crazy about these mounds is from the ground level up, nothing is living in them. Instead, they take the mound, they point it at the zenith of the sun, which means the sun hits it directly so that the inside is shaded. All along the outer layer of this, there's little holes, and it's designed to suck in fresh oxygen and to expel carbon dioxide, and it can keep a constant temperature regardless of what temperature it is outside. So this is like high design level, keeping your colony in a nice, comfortable temperature, but making sure the ventilation is taken care of as well. The fungus itself and the termites live underground in colonies. So they've hollowed out chambers down here. Some house the fungus and some house the termites themselves. So all of this structure is just for ventilation and temperature regulation. They additionally feed the fungus and then eat the fungus. Now we get into our biotrophic fungi. There's 3 ways that you can get your food from living things if you're a fungus. One is what this Pholiota does, which is a pathogen. This Pholiota will decompose living plants, but it only preys on the weak. So the plant has to be on its way out already. Maybe it's old and it's sick, or it has a disease of another type. But once a plant is weakened, Pholiota will get in there and it will start decomposing the plant while it's still alive. So it's pathogenic. It causes a disease for the plant. Then we have commensalism and endophytic fungi. In a commensalism, one of the partners is benefited. So here, this is a picture of a leaf. Here's the stomata, the breathing hole of the leaf. And this is the hyphae of a fungi. This fungi is benefiting. It has a place to live. It's totally protected. When this leaf falls to the ground, it'll probably decompose it. But the other partner, the leaf, we don't think the plant is harmed. In this association, the fungi benefits, but the plant is harmed. In a commensalism, the fungi benefits, but the plant isn't harmed. It's not being hurt in the process. So we call that a commensalism. Endo being inside, phytic is like your life cycle. So inside a plant. And then our last one is a mutualist. So these are porcini mushrooms. These are wonderful edible. There's one right here. This picture was taken on our campus. So we have porcini growing on campus. Its genus is Boletus edulis. And these porcinis, they're delicious to us. Squirrels love them too. But they are associated with trees. So you can see these acorns in the background. There's a big, beautiful oak tree, and the roots of the oak tree are spread underground. The fungus will go up to those roots. Remember, it's mycelium underground, the fungus's body. It'll wrap around the roots. It'll take its plasma membrane and the plant's plasma membrane, and they will touch plasma membranes so that the plant and the fungi can exchange things from one body to another. The plant does photosynthesis, and it gives sugars to the fungi. The fungi collects water way better than a plant can, so it gives water to the plant. But the fungus also is good at collecting nitrogen and other things that are hard for the plant to get itself, so it shuttles those over as well. And fungi are good at making antibiotics, and so they'll produce antibiotics and give those to the plant. In return, the plant's paying with sugar. And so the fungi gets its sugars from the plant, but the plant gets everything else from the fungus. And this association is literally plasma membrane to plasma membrane. So it's super, like, it's hard to tell where one starts and one stops. And that is a mutualism, because they're both benefiting. The fungi benefits, but the plant also benefits. In each of these three situations, the fungi is feeding off the plant or something else. Now, biotrophic fungi that are pathogens are actually a big problem in the Pacific Northwest. It causes a lot of loss of agricultural plants used for timber. Here I have a picture of a Western gall rust. So a gall is a swollen part of the plant. This is filled with a fungi that's producing these orange spores. We call it a rust because it usually looks powdery and rusty. So these cause significant economic loss. They're also a problem in agriculture. So brassica, which is like broccoli, cauliflower, beets, kale, all of a lot of our vegetables, they are prone to rust as well. And this is really common. So there's thousands of species that will parasitize plants as a rust. Here is a really cool example of a rust. This is Pousinia. Remember, just say every vowel and pretend you're right all the time. Confidence is what matters. So Pousinia. And this rust parasitizes Arabis. It causes the plant to produce an elongated structure that looks a little bit like the flower. But all of this yellow isn't the plant, it's the fungus. So the fungus forces the plant to grow this structure. And now it kind of looks like a flower, but it's not. So it's called a pseudo-flower. This pseudo-flower attracts pollinators because they think it's a flower, and they come over to this plant expecting to get nectar, and instead they get covered in the spores of this rust. And when they leave, they disperse those spores to another plant and spread the rust. So it tricks the plant into looking like a flower, and then tricks the pollinator into visiting the flower, and then that pollinator spreads the pathogen, which is just so cool. We also have the loss of our American chestnuts. This was a big deal. In about 100 years. We went from having 4 billion American chestnuts to 4. Like, that survival rate is so small. This was the original range of the American chestnut, and it just died back to 4. That's a huge loss ecologically, but it's also a huge loss because people would use the chestnut for a food source. Lots of animals used it as a food source. We also have significant agriculture loss, and we have the Dutch elm disease that is taking out pine and elm, which is really a problem for the timber industry as well. We also have huitlacoche. I don't know if you've ever tried it before, but that's the name of this. It is a corn smut. It's caused by a fungus that infects corn. So here's normal corn kernels. Here is a corn kernel that has been infected with the fungus. So it creates these massive fungal tumors, and it is delicious. If you haven't tried it yet, you can often find it canned in grocery stores. It is so good. So it tastes just like a combination of corn and fungus. I highly recommend getting some Ecology if you have an opportunity to. But it is a problem for farming corn. So it is delicious, but it's also really ugly, and so it doesn't sell as well. People have to know that it's good. Otherwise, you would just throw that out because that looks like a monster. We also have erga. So whether or not we pronounce the T is debated, so ergot or erga. But that is a infection of grain. So I found some of this on the grasses on Powell Butte. I was really excited about it. Sometimes ergot can create the precursors chemically for LSD. And so ergotism is a symptom of eating infected grain that has this fungi on it. And it can create hallucinations, but also vomiting, seizures. It's a horrible thing to experience. There's an idea that maybe what was happening in the Salem witch trials was actually ergotism, and people were eating grain infected with this fungus, and they were having visions of the devil or whatever. It's unlikely that's the only cause. We know there's also other causes for events like that, but it is an idea that has been put forward as a hypothesis. Ergot does exist and it can create hallucinations, so maybe that did play a part, but we're not sold on that idea yet. All right, and then cordyceps is amazing. Cordyceps is a type of fungus that infects bugs. It's also the basis for the video game The Last of Us and the TV show based on the video game The Last of Us, which, if you like horror, was wonderful. Cordyceps themselves have been used medicinally for centuries. So I have a video for you about how cordyceps work for the insects, and it's horrifying, really scary. So far, they do not affect mammals. They only affect insects. There are a ton of cordyceps that actually parasitize other mushrooms. So that's interesting on its own. But if you want to try some cordyceps supplements, there are dozens on the market, and there have been for hundreds of years. We also have fungi pathogens that affect other fungi. So here is a Russula mushroom, and this Russula mushroom is infected with a mold called hypomyces. So hypo being below, myces is fungus. And it has infected this mushroom and is slowly eating it. You can see where there used to be gills. Russula, the mushroom under here, Russula brevis, is a big white mushroom. And so as it gets infected, it eats off the lamellar area, so where the gills were, covers its whole body, and it starts digesting the mushroom. So the yellow is the mold, the white is the mushroom itself. We love this mushroom. We call it the lobster mushroom, but we like it when it's infected. We don't like it when it's uninfected. So as soon as it starts to get parasitized, it tastes better, it changes the texture, and it's called the lobster mushroom for the color because it's supposed to look like cooked seafood. I don't think it tastes or smells like seafood, but some people say it does. I think it tastes and smells like a mushroom. We have this in our area. This picture is from Corbett. So really beautiful edible mushrooms in our area. And it's cool because when you eat this, you're eating two fungi in one. We also have some biotrophic fungi that are hunters. So here I've got a picture of the mycelium of pleurotus. That was the oyster mushroom I showed you earlier, growing out of a log in Dabney Park along the Sandy. And in this mycelium, you can see all these little circles. Those little circles are lassos, and those lassos are touch sensitive. So when something small, like this nematode, C. elegans is the name of nematodes, when this little nematode swims into the lasso, it starts to narrow and it squeezes it and it catches it in its lasso. And so now the nematode is stuck, and the fungus will grow hyphae toward its mouth or butt. and it will go right in its orifice, and it will start to decompose it from the inside out. So pretty wild hunters. One of the most important associations on Earth is mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae is the association with fungi and plants. This is the one that I was talking about with the porcini. Here we have a seedling, so we can see the seedling. These are its roots. Here's one that's just growing. Here's one that has 3 roots. This seedling is doing okay. Then the scientists added the mycorrhizal partner, and now you can see all of this webbing here. This is fungus. So the fungus has grown around the roots, has spread out from the roots, and has created way more surface area for that plant, which is amazing because that fungus is now able to cover the area better, absorb water better, take all those little nutrients out from those areas, decompose them, suck them in, and give them to the plant. So the plant is getting better nutrition and better water. In return, the plant does photosynthesis. Fungi can't, they're heterotrophs. And this plant that's doing photosynthesis is creating sugars. It's taking those sugars and it's giving them back to the fungus. So they are trading resources. They are associated with each other on a cellular level, and they are sharing what they need to survive, and they both benefit. So this is a mutualism, both are succeeding, and it is arguably the most important one on Earth because 92% of all plants do this. So first of all, that's almost everybody, 92%, but that includes rice, potato, sugarcane, cotton, coffee, Douglas fir, most of our conifers. That means that our building resources, our food resources, all of these plants that humanity relies on, like imagine a world without rice and potato and cotton. Like that would totally change our human evolution because we need those things to create society and agriculture. If we didn't have the plants, we wouldn't have the communities that we have now. And so that's fascinating. We can thank fungus for most of our meals and most of the things that we wear and these buildings that we are inside of. Just incredible. Here's a close-up of mycorrhizae. We have 2 types. So myco means fungi, rhizae means root. So that's the association of plant roots and fungus. We have ectomycorrhizae. Ecto is outside of. That is when the fungus, this is the blue, grows all around the plant and penetrates the plant and grows around the cells. So it's growing around the cells. You can't pull the fungus off. The fungus and the plant are literally integrated into each other. But it stays outside the cells. So that's ecto. In endo, which we now call arbuscular, endomycorrhizae, it will grow on the outside of the root, but then it will puncture the root. It'll grow right into these cells, and it will grow little balloon-like structures in the cells. It'll push against the plant's plasma membrane, but it won't puncture it. So now you're inside the cell wall of the plant, and your plasma membranes are touching each other, and the nutrient exchange is just going right through those transport proteins. Like this, at this point, it's hard to determine where the plant starts and where the fungi starts. The intimate association between the two is so incredible. So in both of these, the fungi is giving the plant water, a lot of water, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, antibiotics, and in exchange, the plant is giving the fungus sugar. Of those 92 plants that we talked about that have a mycorrhizal association, 80% of them are endomycorrhizal, so they do that really close plasma membrane to plasma membrane contact. Here are actual images of it. We can see those beautiful structures inside of the cell. Look at all that surface area. So this is just direct contact between a plant and a fungus, just incredible. We do know that when it first starts, it can cause some growth depression for plants, but that goes away after a little while. So there might be a little bit of adjustment to someone invading your cells and touching your plasma membrane, but then the exchange occurs and both of the partners benefit. We've seen fossil evidence of this, these beautiful intrusions of fungi into the plant cell from 400 million years ago. We actually think that these fungal mycorrhizal associations is what helped plants go from aquatic to terrestrial. Because when you move from the water to the land, all of a sudden you have to worry about drying out. And if you have a fungus with you that's really good at picking up water, you are more likely to survive. So we think that's why 92% of plants on Earth are mycorrhizal, because our ancestral plant was also mycorrhizal. And that's the only way it made it out of the water onto land, is because the fungi was helping it. We also have mycoheterotrophs. So in mycorrhizae, the fungus and the plant were helping each other. In mycoheterotrophs, the fungi and the plant are still helping each other, but now you have a parasitic plant joining as a third. So this parasitic plant does not have chlorophyll. It does not do photosynthesis. Instead, it steals sugar from the fungi. But remember, that fungi doesn't do photosynthesis. It's getting its sugar from its partner. So this is like tertiary level sugar exchange. We have a bunch of these in our area. They're all beautiful. This one is monotropa. It's white because it doesn't have chlorophyll. It doesn't have chloroplast. It can't do photosynthesis. All of the sugar needed to create the cellular bodies of this monotropa, the ghost pipe, is from fungus, which is getting it from other plants. So it's stealing secondhand from other plants. Here are some other ones in our area. We have pine drops and allotropa, the sugar stick. Look how gorgeous that is. We think that the pink coloration might help prevent UV damage, but it's not using it for photosynthesis. Both of these flowering plants are stealing their sugars. And then in our area, we also have a orchid, the Western fairy slipper, Calypso. And this orchid here is mycoheterotrophic. It does not do photosynthesis. This is not its leaf. It doesn't have a leaf. It just puts up this beautiful orchid flower. This is from Gifford Pinchot Forest. I was looking for morels and found this beautiful orchid right next to some. So just absolutely amazing. And most, if not all, orchids are mycoheterotrophic. Orchids in general won't even germinate their seeds unless they're in the presence of their fungal partner. So orchids as a group fully rely on fungus. Even if they do photosynthesis for some period of their life, they are reliant on the fungus. So fungi and orchids are like besties. We also have endophytic fungi that live inside of the growing parts of plants, which we didn't expect and we're very excited about. Here, this is the apical meristem of a plant. So this is the tip of the plant where it's growing tall. And in between this apical meristem and these apical buds that will turn into leaves eventually, you have this dark webbing. And that dark webbing, when we sequence it, it's fungi. So we now think that maybe fungi is a component of plants. And we have found endophytic fungi like this, which isn't decomposing it, isn't a mutualism that's benefiting it, but it's just in there in most of the plants we've examined. Why? We don't know. What it means, we don't know. What it's doing, we don't know, but it's there. And that's really interesting. We've also found endophytic fungi living in the guts of 5% of all bugs, including marine crustaceans. So there's fungi living in the guts of shrimp and crab and lobster hanging out on the bottom of the ocean. Why? What's it doing? We don't know. We have so much more work to do before we understand this really incredible group of organisms. Lichen is also an example of a biotropic fungi. Here in this top picture, there are tons of different lichen here. This is a lichen that we describe as foliose, so it kind of looks like flat leaves. If it's wild and branched like this is the wolf lichen, really common in our area. We call it fructicose. And if it's flat like these gray ones, we call it crustose. You can see the little reproductive structures of the flat ones here. This is another species producing black reproductive structures. This is the sunburst lichen. This is the type that has a huge mass over by Lateral Falls, because if you haven't done that hike yet, highly recommended. Wonderful hike. Lots of beautiful lichen. Lichen is an association between a fungus and an algae, and sometimes a cyanobacteria. And in this, if we were to zoom in on the body of these lichen, we would see fungal mycelium wrapped around algae. So this is an algae. This algae is green because it has chlorophyll, it's doing photosynthesis, and as it creates sugar, it gives those sugars to the fungus. In return, the fungus creates a perfect little habitat for it. It absorbs water. It allows it to exist in the world without dehydrating and dying. And so this is a mutualism where both of these things are benefiting each other. It's cool because it looks like one critter, but it's actually 2 or 3 critters together. Lichen are really important for nitrogen cycling, creating soil that can break down rock. They're one of the first things to move into a habitat that's been disturbed. So after a volcanic eruption or a wildfire, lichen are one of the first to recolonize an area. And lichen are cool because they're really susceptible to pollution. So they are an indicator species. Lichen have all but disappeared from the LA basin because there's just too much smog. So when the lichens start to die out, we know that something is going on in the ecosystem. And the last thing that we want to talk about with fungi ecology is that fungi are really important in the food web. So here we have an Amanita muscaria being eaten by a slug. This is another Amanita. This is Amanita pantherina being eaten by a squirrel. Fungi are a huge source of food for rodents, and rodents themselves are a huge source of food for all these other organisms like predatory birds and foxes and coyotes, especially in areas in higher elevation, because rodents will sustain themselves on acorns. Oaks are really important to the ecosystem, but oaks stop growing at like 10,000 feet. And so above 10,000 feet, the main food source of many types of rodents is fungus. Specifically, underground fungus is really important too. And so you'll see all these digging marks in higher areas where fungi have been dug out by rodents, squirrels, chipmunks, flying squirrels, and consumed. And then those rodents are the food for so many other organisms. And fungi is also a good source of food for us. So this is me, and this is Parker. And Parker is smelling a beautiful golden Pacific chanterelle. That is our state mushroom. It is edible. It grows everywhere in our area, and it is delicious. Parker did not get to eat it, but he was excited about being able to smell it. I don't know if you guys bring things for your cats to smell, but I always bring things home for my cats to smell. So that is the ecology of fungi, and I will see you soon to talk about the life cycles of fungi. Have a great day.